Hello, thank you for tuning in to the Katie Sassine Show. I'm your host, as always, Katie Sassine, addressing the indoctrination of the nation. And today, on this lovely Thursday, we are continuing the vaccination investigation. Now, we're going to start out with talking about Miss Brandy Vaughn. She interviewed on InfoWars, and she discussed the dangers of vaccinations. She's the founder of an organization that informs people about the dangers of vaccinations and excuse me, why you should be cautious about getting your child, an infant especially, a vaccination before you go ahead and bite the bullet and say, okay, doc, whatever you say. So why should you not second guess your doctor necessarily, but why should you ask your doctor more questions? Because sometimes doctors are following orders, and this following orders has yielded one of the biggest crises noted by many today, which is the exacerbation of vaccinations and not the exacerbation of vaccinations, but the extensive amounts of vaccinations used today in the developed country, the United States of America. Nearly twice more than the vaccinations used for children in other developed countries. And it seems that as a result of that, our population of children is sicker than any other population of developed countries in the world. And the only thing different that's going on here, unless it's something in the air, in the water, is the vaccinations. Which I can't say it's the air or the water because it's a national thing. It's not targeted in a certain state or a certain town or anything like that. So Brandy Vaughn, she did an interview for InfoWars, Council for Vaccine Safety founder and former pharmaceutical rep for Merck, which, as we know, has faced billions of dollars of lawsuits in the past for fraud and lying. So this is not a company that can necessarily be trusted. She worked for Merck, and through working for Merck, she developed a distrust of doctors. So if you've ever known a pharmaceutical rep, you may have heard them tell you the same thing, that when they started working as a pharmaceutical rep, they had a totally different perspective of the healthcare system than after, because they realized how important selling was in the medical market. They realized how important profits were, and they realized that the importance of profits preceded the importance of health in the system of health in the United States of America. So I have to because that's just, it's very sad that that has happened. So what do you do? What do we do about people like this, about companies like this? Well, we have to set policy. We have to set regulations. We have to make sure they pay their consequences. We have to check on them multiple times. We have to think of them as guilty until they prove themselves innocent, because they've already been caught being guilty once. And, well, not once, multiple times. We discussed one instance. In 2015, 50 recommended vaccines were on the CDC schedule for children 6 and under. Wow. That's more than any other developed country in the world. We have now the first generation of children that are sicker than their parents, and this is probably due to the increase of vaccinations. Children in the U.S. are now sicker than the generation before. In what world does this happen? I mean, in what world do a generation of adults have children that are less well off than they are? I mean, immunity-wise. And it just doesn't, it's terrible. Vaughn says that the U.S., and we have a picture to show of a text here, has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the developed world. Will you pull up that text box for us, Sam? Brandy Vaughn says that the U.S. has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the developed world. Now, what makes us unique in the developed world is that we give vaccinations, more vaccinations to our infants than other developed countries, and same with our children. So we can say that, well, this is not a one-to-one correlation, but all the signs are pointing to, yes, this is a one-to-one correlation. Vaccinations are causing this high infant mortality rate, these high rates of death in children, the new generation of children that are sicker than the generation before, which is atrocious. And then she goes on to say that the U.S. has some of the highest rates of developmental disorders like speech delays, ADHD, autism, type 1 diabetes, childhood leukemia, epilepsy, asthma, autoimmune disorders like food allergies, psoriasis, eczema, gut issues, lupus, and the list goes on. And the only thing that's different than the constant from the US to other countries is vaccination. That's the whole idea of this vaccination investigation on the Katie Sassine show as part of the indoctrination of the nation. So vaccines could indeed be linked to these rates. Obviously, it could be direct causation. But I can't rightfully say that because I don't know. I'd have to do extensive studies that would take years. But from what I can see, yes, that's probably a direct correlation. So Vaughn says vaccines are all about profit. Let's get that picture back up of Vaughn. Vaughn says vaccines are all about profit. There are over 300 vaccines under development in the U.S. Hence, all the food allergies and autoimmune diseases. Pharmaceutical usage in the U.S. is extensive. The government threatens the proliferation of infectious diseases to prompt vaccine consumption. The marketing to get vaccines is crazy. And how they target the youth? It's absolutely insane. They make it seem essential. Do you remember the Gardasil commercial? Because we're going to talk about Gardasil later. I want to be one less, one less. They showed a girl jump roping, and it was a bunch of girls playing on a playground that were about 11 or 12, the age that they target these girls to get vaccinated. And now boys, they want to be shot up with Gardasil. And I say shot up on purpose, as they're, shooting them up straight in the blood veins with, injectables that have not been fully tested for safety. So you never know what's in there, people. So pharmaceutical usage in the U.S. is extensive. Government threatens proliferation of infectious diseases to prompt vaccine consumption. I've already read that. Dissenters of Vaughn say that vaccines are not profitable. But Vaughn responds, and we know, and if you Google it, you can find out that vaccines became profitable. So the people that have spoke out against her are incorrect with their argument, first of all, which I'm sure there's other arguments, but the main argument was vaccines aren't really profitable. And if they are, why does it matter? Well, they became profitable in 1986. She expressed on InfoWars that vaccine makers became exempt from the liability of the vaccine that they've made. So that came about with the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Act. U.S. citizens were also forbade to sue vaccine makers, and there was complete liability protection for vaccine makers. Now, that means that one has no personal obligation to the vaccine that they've introduced into the world, which means that they have you could say, limited liability. They can come out and make a product and not be held liable. So, as far as, ethics go and morals, one is more inclined to compromise their ethics if they don't have to bear any kind of personal consequences. Now, mandatory vaccines. Why was that website called Stop Mandatory Vaccines? Well, there's been talk that they're trying to make vaccines mandatory because marketing alone is not enough to convince citizens to get vaccinations, especially adults. Now, let's check out, we're going to go to this GoFundMe, and I want to show you guys one way that you can help stop mandatory vaccinations.
Hi, my name is Larry Cook, and I'm a natural health advocate and author of this book, The Beginner's Guide to Natural Living. I'm here today because I absolutely oppose all of the bills going into the legislative process throughout the country that are trying to mandate forced vaccinations on the population. I'm absolutely opposed to mandatory vaccinations for the populace. Now, there's a lot of people working on this issue in the various states where these bills are being introduced, and I would like to contribute my expertise to this process as well. And quite specifically, what I'd like to do is to create videos and written communication and photography of parents, legislators, attorneys, teachers, daycare workers, healthcare workers, MDs, DOs, you name it, nurses, whoever has a stake in this entire situation. I want to be able to interview them, put them on camera, put them on my YouTube channel, and get those videos and get the written communications out to the various groups who are trying to make a difference in this and trying to contact their legislators. So let me explain a little bit what that looks like. I'll have a website. It'll be categorized by groups of people, parents who have children who are vaccine injured.
So that was the author of The Beginner's Guide to Natural Living. You can buy that book anywhere online. And that was the GoFundMe page that he has started. No vaccine mandates. He is against mandatory vaccinations, something that is being pushed by pharmaceutical reps and companies such as Merck, MERCK, in order to increase profits, because marketing alone is not enough now to convince people to get their vaccines. But marketing is enough to convince you to get a pizza. But a vaccine, not so much. Anyway, we have to cut to a break for today, but when we return, we'll continue talking about some frightening and shocking statistics. And check out a video of Ms. Brandy Vaughn herself.
Ace is your helpful place for paint and home goods, tools, outdoor living, and lawn equipment. But did you know Ace Hardware of Blue Ridge is a little bit more? We have hunting rifles and accessories for your next hunting trip. We have Amish furniture imported directly from Ohio. And we have Ace Custom Woodworks for all your custom wood project needs, from cabinets to artwork. Ace Hardware of Blue Ridge, we have your new house in stock.
At Days Chevrolet in Jasper, we make everything better. It all starts with a huge new Chevy selection. Then we heap on the discounts to make sure your Chevy price is the lowest you'll find anywhere. And if you like great customer service, you'll love it at Days. Bigger selection, lower prices, easy financing, and great customer service. Your better day is just ahead at Days Chevrolet in Jasper, where new Chevys cost less.
Better days ahead, Days Chevrolet.
Find new roads.
North Georgia Diamond is your source for diamonds. Come on in to view the area's largest selection of fine jewelry at North Georgia Diamond. All repairs and designs are done on site by our jewelers. And North Georgia Diamond has the lowest prices on loose diamonds. You can also sell your gold, silver, and coins at North Georgia Diamond between Walmart and Lowe's in East Ellijay. Locally owned by Bill and Allison Craig, North Georgia Diamond is your source for diamonds in North Georgia.
Hi, I'm Rhonda the Mattress Lady, and this is my husband Gary, owners of Mattress Overstocked in Ellijay next to Walmart. And we want to earn your business. From the time you walk in our door to the time we deliver your new mattress to your door, you will see the difference. Our selection and prices are the best in North Georgia, and customer service is our top priority. So y'all come on in and let us help you find the right mattress at the right price. That's Mattress Overstocked in Ellijay next to Walmart.
What you gonna do with all that junk?
Spring is one of the best times of year to visit the North Georgia mountains. Not only do we celebrate fall apples in Gilmer County, we celebrate the blossoms of spring. The Georgia Apple Blossom Festival brings one exciting weekend to East Ellijay, Georgia. This free, pet-friendly event has over 50 hand-selected regional vendors offering food, art, crafts, kids' activities, and more. For more information, visit GeorgiaAppleBlossomFestival.com.
Hello, TGIT. Welcome back to the Katie Sassine Show, addressing the indoctrination of the nation. As always, I am your host, Katie Sassine, the same person from before the break. And we are discussing the vaccination investigation. And I've had the help of InfoWars. I've had the help of Brandy Vaughn, the founder of the Council for Vaccine Safety, that informs the public of the dangers of vaccines that your doctor will not tell you. And previously, yesterday and today on the show, we've talked about the dangers of vaccines. We've talked about the adjuvants, including aluminum and even possibly mercury. That was more popular in the past, but still present today. And we talked about the bacteriophages that kill good bacteria. And we've talked about how more vaccinations are being pushed on children and infants every day. But what this has actually resulted in is a sicker generation of children than before. So the only thing that makes our country different in the way that we care for our children and we live day to day, aside from the air we breathe and the water we drink because of our location, is the vaccination. The US gives double the vaccinations to children and infants than any other developed country. So with food consumption and water consumption in the experiment, you could say, being controlled, vaccination is the difference here in the US that is causing all of these diseases and early death and the proliferation of cancer. And if you didn't know, if you're a citizen of the United States of America and you're a male, you have a 1 in 2 chance of developing cancer throughout your lifetime, to the point where it's detrimental to your health. We all have cancer in us. We all already have cancer in us. But you have a 1 in 2 chance as a male in the United States for having your life altered by cancer. As a female, no, it's 2 in 3. And as a female, it's 1 in 3. So the chances are lower for females, but nonetheless, the chances are high as a whole. And this could be due to our vaccinations. Now, for the longest time, I thought it was sugar consumption or GMO consumption. But countries in Western Europe consume GMOs just the same. Some countries don't, but many do. But GMOs are consumed all around the world. And high sugar diets are consumed all around the world. So, and there's not necessarily a direct correlation between cancer and obesity. So how can we link sugar with cancer? And I don't know. It's just very tricky. So maybe it's a combination of everything. But needless to say, there's something up with the vaccinations. And we discussed Merck earlier. That's the pharmaceutical company that Brandy Vaughn was a representative for. We listened to Brandy Vaughn speak about the dangers of the adjuvant aluminum in vaccinations and how she believes that the vaccination market is a market for profit and not for global progress in terms of health. So that's obviously problematic and disturbing to know as a US citizen, because you want your government to look out for you. We want our government to look out for us. We want to know and feel that we are safe. But, you just don't know until you know. Now, there's a photo I got from InfoWars, and it had some good statistics on it. We're going to check that out. The World Health Organization says that the risk of cervical cancer is 1 in 40,000. Now, bear in mind, we had discussed the HPV vaccination. There are certain vaccinations for cancers. The HPV vaccination called Gardasil is one of them. It was first designed to give to young girls. Now it's designed for both girls and boys. And upon its testing, there were many severe outbreaks and side effects of paralysis, just random muscle pains throughout the body that have debilitated children, and even death, convulsions, seizures from the Gardasil vaccine. And here's the statistic. The World Health Organization says the risk of cervical cancer is only 1 in 40,000. Now, we are giving children this vaccination at 11 and 12 years old before they're old enough to think about its risk or care about its risk, because all they're thinking about is Pokemon or the Disney show, or, you know, who they're going to go out to the movies with on Friday. That's literally, you know, maybe the sports teams are involved in. They're not thinking about, am I going to die tomorrow? Like adults know that fear. That fear is instilled in adults. Kids just they don't get that yet. So they're not going to go and research. Maybe I should ask my doctor about what ingredients are in this medicine. No, 12-year-old's not going to do that. And some of these 12-year-olds are getting vaccinations without their parents' consent. So only 88% of all cervical cancer occurs in non-Western countries without regular, you know, health protocol. Only 12% of cervical cancer cases are in developed countries. 88% of cervical cancer cases occur outside of the United States. But yet we're pushing this vaccination upon our children, even though only 12% of cervical cancer cases are in developed countries, including the United States of America. Then it goes on to say only 2 strains of HPV may lead to cervical cancer of over 100 different strains. More than 90% of all HPV infections clear on their own. So we see just a few statistics there that maybe have you thinking, what's the point of this vaccination Gardasil that the doctor wants my 11 or 12-year-old to have, or that the doctor wants my 11 or 12-year-old niece to have, or whoever you know in that age bracket? You know, they want the children to get it before they've ever been exposed to any kind of, you know, intimate relationship, obviously, because then getting the vaccination post-exposure could be pointless, which, you know, it sounds pointless to begin with. The vaccination altogether, after reading the statistics, sounds absolutely pointless. Why are we doing this? So let's check out a video of Robert Scott Bell. He's a radio host who says that the HPV vaccine is actually a crime against kids. Let's hear what he's got to say.
Put a bill that's on the desk of the governor. I don't know, by the time people view this, it might be a done deal, we don't know, that would mandate the HPV shot for you know, young girls, and young girls as young as 12 can go in without parental knowledge or consent to the doctor and get this shot, and they don't even know it. I mean, these girls could end up harmed or killed, and their parents were like, what happened? They wouldn't even know. But it only covers about 2 or so strains of the HPV, and there are many. And again, in addition to this, it stimulates, if they're lucky, if they get what they want, the antibody to the human papilloma virus, or a couple of the strains that they say are causing it. Now, is an antibody sufficient to prevent any disease? Well, I'm not a fan of that perspective, even though I'm not against antibodies. But let's take the example of chickenpox. Right? Everybody knows about chickenpox. Yep. I had it when I found out there were kids in the neighborhood that had it. I took my kids over to get it, the chickenpox parties, because you know it's a normal rite of passage. It actually strengthens kids to go through some of these ailments or diseases. And in this case, we get chickenpox. We're told we have lifelong immunity. We'll never get the chickenpox again. But it turns out that wasn't exactly true. As adults, if we're under stress, if we're deficient, if we're toxic, we can succumb to the very same virus that caused chickenpox in childhood. That's the herpes zoster varicella, the varicella virus. What does it cause in adulthood? It's called the shingles. Ever heard of the shingles?
Absolutely.
It's the same virus that caused the chickenpox that you have a lifelong immunity to because you have an antibody. So you already know about this virus. Your immune system knows it well, but it can't defend itself because you're depleted, you're weakened by what? Life, or the lack thereof, by deficiencies, toxicity, stress, liver congestion, all of these things. Now, having said that, I plant a seed for people to think about the whole vaccine paradigm, which I want. But we go back to HPV and we realize that even medical scientists acknowledge that most people, most women that contract this human papilloma virus through sexual intercourse or however they get it, will clear the virus of their own accord simply because their immune system is intact. It will clear in and of itself, and it will be no long-term problem. Now, if you are concerned, we go back to silver. Silver is virostatic. We would utilize something like the silver hydrosol locally to interact and stop the replication on contact at the cervix, if that's where you're concerned about it, or anywhere in the female system. And therefore, we would never, ever have to rely on the potential death or dismemberment, if you will, the damage and danger of this murky human papilloma virus vaccine called Gardasil or the Cervarix from GSK. So for me, this is a crime perpetrated against little girls, and they want to perpetrate it against little boys as well. So when you ask me that question, I don't have a lot to say.
Okay, well, that was mind-blowing. So the goal of getting a vaccination, as Mr. Bell explained, radio host, the goal is getting the antibody for the virus. Some believe, however, that this is not sufficient to prevent succumbing to the adverse effects of a virus. This is not sufficient to be immune to a virus. An example that Mr. Robert Scott Bell gave was the chickenpox virus. Chickenpox is, it comes out as the same virus in adulthood, the same virus that, causes shingles. Shingles is the same virus of chickenpox. Now, the antibody from the chickenpox vaccination is not sufficient for that virus immunity, evidently, because those that have had it end up with the shingles. So that immunity and that protection, it doesn't provide for the longevity of one's life. So, and I know that if you get chickenpox as a kid, you can get shingles as an adult. And so I guess what they're trying to do with these vaccinations is, so he goes on to say most women's natural immunity clears the virus with any vaccination. So let's show that picture of Robert Scott Bell for the viewers. So what can we assume? Well, we can assume that these vaccinations are not necessarily keeping us safe, but they could actually, in the long run, be preparing the human race for a giant wipeout. Because a giant virus wipeout. Because we're being pumped with these so-called vaccinations that are supposed to make us immune. But in reality, we're weakening our body because we're training our body to be dependent on this foreign virus injected into our bloodstream with other adjuvants or additives like aluminum and mercury that cause neurodamage. We're becoming dependent on these to be safe from viruses, when in reality, we should be building up a natural immunity. So what happens if some super virus comes into town and the vaccinations they give us just don't work? Well, we're going to be SOL because we have been so trained to be dependent on vaccines to be immune that if there is a virus that comes about that we can't find a vaccination for, we're done. Because for how long have we been dependent on vaccines to be immune to viruses? For a very long time, we've become dependent. And we know the very popular and touted and praised vaccination is the polio vaccination, which wasn't even necessarily, more effective than not effective. So there's a whole lot of conspiracy with that as well. But the conspiracy that I'm telling you about, do you remember the Denver International Airport episode where we talked about AUAG on the mural and how that was said to symbolize Australian antigen as a virus that would sweep the world and cause mass genocide? Well, vaccinations allow for that kind of thing to happen. Because over a long period of time, we're making our bodies, for generations and generations now, dependent on receiving a foreign agent injected into our bloodstream by the doctor to become protected, when in fact, our evolution should protect us. And the immunities we have developed and that we have inherited. But instead, no. We're now dependent on these doctors. And who's to say that when some virus sweeps the globe and we have no vaccine for it, who's to say that the vaccine is not just being withheld from the public for population control? That's a conspiracy to think about. I know that sounds far out. I know you don't want to think about not being able to trust your government. I know that's a scary thought. I know I don't want to put the fear of God into you, but I do want to tell you the reality of what this is doing and what could possibly happen. So just be prepared. And if you've got an underground bunker, let me know, because I don't. So Robert Scott Bell, not only a popular radio host, but he is a homeopathic practitioner, discusses the theory behind the HPV vaccine and whether or not he thinks it's safe in depth on several interviews. So feel free to check out more Robert Scott Bell. Remember to look at more into Brandy Vaughn as well, the founder of the Council for Vaccination Safety. And if you ever are skeptical and you ever want to ask your doctor a question about the medicine you're being given, do not hesitate. And remember to inform yourself if an injectable has aluminum in it before before being injected with it, because it is damaging to your central nervous system. Now, before we go, I want to view a page on the internet. This was posted in 2010, but it predicted the vaccine market would be worth $52 billion in 2016. Wow, that is staggering. So global vaccine revenues will be $52 billion in 2016, more than double the total for 2009, driven by new products and indication expenses of established therapies, according to a report. So to all those dissenters of Brandy Vaughn that said that Vaughn was wrong, well, just read a book or just read a Google page. Just read an article. That's all you got to do. There's a common saying, you know, when someone is very ignorant, there's a common saying that I use as a joke. It's called read a book. Someone says, you know, who was our second president? All I have to say is read a book. You know, now in modern day we can say read Google. Search on Google. But, you know, that's all I got to say to those dissenters of Brandy Vaughn. Read a book, dissenters, and you will see there are real dangers in this. Anyway, that's all we got this week for the Katie Sassine Show. So far, we'll be back tomorrow live from Blue Jeans Pizza with a surprise special guest. So make sure you tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. And you can also check out all of our YouTube archives on our YouTube channel, Fetch Your News. Go to videos, and then you'll see a playlist of videos from most to least recent. And remember to stay tuned in with FYN TV, Real News Now. And as always, I'm your host, Katie Sassine of The Katie Sassine Show. I'll see you tomorrow.